Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
I'm Nerdarchy Ted.
And today I had an idea for a video. I don't know if this is going to be a Game Master's tip or not. We'll see how it progresses. but essentially, I was thinking about, combat descriptions, what hit points actually mean mechanically in the game, and, and is that fun? All kind of mingled together.
Before we get too deep into that, though, why don't you go deeper into the description? Look for the link for Nerdarchy, the newsletter. Sign up. It's a great way to get gaming tips delivered straight to your inbox, as well as learn how to game with us.
And here's what I mean by that, right? So I think most of us understand that hit points are an abstraction of basically your overall general health in the game, right? There's not a direct correlation.
Right.
So, like, you take 10 points of damage, you just did not get run through by a sword, you didn't take an arrow to the eye, you have not been impaled, chances are you have not even received a cut. Or maybe a scrape. Yeah,
if you've got something that does, a significant amount of damage, you might have, a scrape, a bruise. You might have gotten winded. If you're wearing armor and someone, socks you in the gut, whether it's bladed or not, it's going to compress, and unfortunately, that's going to shove a lot of air out of your lungs. So, in my opinion, at least hit points as it's presented in D&D, at least the last several editions, it's
always actually been presented this way.
Well, I mean, back in 2nd edition, we did all kinds of crazy stuff, and people survived with, arrows in the eye, swords literally through them, and it's like, oh...
Well, what we did and what was actually meant by the designers are completely different.
True. But it's supposed to represent your combat endurance. If you've ever done any kind of, martial combat, even if it's fake combat or sparring, you know what it's like to be in the thick of it and actually get wounded. I know you've got a lot of years of martial arts. My hand-to-hand combat knowledge is very minimal, but I spent a lot of years working with weapon combat. And on top of that, LARP fighting, which, LARP fighting, there's not a whole lot of real risk of injury short of someone going crazy or you tripping in the woods. And I don't mean that, with medicine.
I don't think you really can call that medicine.
Well,
but,
but you wind up getting... tired. Your muscles get sore the longer you're fighting. The getting hit repeatedly in the same area. Your muscles are going to move slower. They're going to get weaker.
Well, like the best example I can think of is in the one Goju Ryu school I trained at, and a lot of the different martial arts schools you have to do full contact fighting to progress past to the next level. Well, I actually he was taking my test when someone else was taking a black belt test, and they had to do all their forms, their katas and their techniques, and also like the physical fitness type stuff. But then in addition to that, they had to get their black belt test. They had to fight 12 3-minute rounds. And they would have to fight they fought a fresh opponent every round. So they would take the brown belts and black belts from the school. They might even bring in, instructors or senseis from other schools. But, even if you fought someone who you already fought, like they've had like 2-3 rounds of rest before getting back in. And by the 10th to the 12th round of this fight, watching it, the guy taking the test looked like he was literally moving in slow motion underwater, and he was giving it, all he had.
Right.
And that's a perfect example of someone who's basically lost like almost all their hit points. Right. But so one of the reasons I was really thinking about doing this video and talking about it though is here's the truth of the matter, right? When we're playing the game and we're describing things as the DM or the players, it's just not fun to say you're after the ogre is slammed, after the ogre does his attack rolls, to tell the player, well, you feel a little winded now, or the experience of combat is starting to wear on you. Like, there's nothing dramatic or particularly fun about that. Because when you look at the combat round, what's actually going on, even though you only have one or two actual attack rolls, the truth of the matter is, you're parrying, you're blocking, you're dodging, you're looking for openings, you're feigning, you're making multiple attacks, right? But what those die rolls are really telling me is that those are how many shots you have of actually like landing.
Based on your skill. If you're a low-level fighter, in that given duration, you have one chance to do it. As you gain in skill and you wind up getting those second attacks, third attacks, it means you've got another chance of actually landing something, and that's based on your degree of skill.
Yes, but so all of that kind of also plays into your hit points, right? Because not only is the hit point or your hit points kind of a determination of what kind of punishment you can take from your opponent, but it's also kind of, to me, is saying like it's how much you can keep going as well. And it's not all physical. Some of it can be a mental and emotional stress as well of being in the thick of combat. I mean, you've got, and especially in a fantasy world, you can have lightning bolts flying, fireballs are going off, magical forces slamming into people. You have all this crazy stuff going on that would be very detrimental to someone, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. There's a term called shell shock.
Right.
Well, in a fantasy game, you could definitely have that happen.
Well,
you get caught in a fireball blast.
I've actually, I've had, kind of that shock experience. Back when I, was doing Arma regularly, the one guy came forward, with a plan for the evening, and he's like, I read a story where a guy was at a bar, and he came through a one-way door. It only opens, from the side he came from, and it locks behind. So now he's in a 6 foot to 10 foot wide corridor. There's two guys who are drunk and have misidentified what would be you as someone that they have a beef with. So the one guy pulls a knife, you're unarmed, you have to get past them, to the door that they came through so that you can make it out alive. And so the guy with the knife is the person who winds up coming forward because he's armed. So in this particular example, I'm the guy with the knife. My buddy Matt is the guy with, who came through the door. Now, he's 6'4", 6'6". I'm nowhere near that tall. He's got arms that we've said are a mile long. So he comes forward with just a jab to the head, and he lands it just right, that by the time I actually come to my senses, it's like a couple seconds later, and he's already dealing with the second guy and moving beyond him. But I just having never really had that punch to the face before. Like, I'm wearing a helmet, he's wearing gloves. Like, neither of us walk away with any real, injury. But I was stunned. I was disoriented for.
You got your bell rung.
So I've literally been in that situation.
Did you come through enough to stab him in his back afterwards?
I was stabbing at him as he was getting past the second guy. So I might have given him a small cut, but I mean he was past the danger zone by the time I was really back in it. So it was interesting.
So I guess the point is is how do you make combat descriptions fun and interesting when what we're saying is you really don't receive any real wounds until you hit 0.
So what I've tend to do in those situations is, even though you take 13 points of damage, I try to say all right, your expert parry catches it at the last minute, and try to describe something that would have happened had you not gotten that block off. That ogre's club would have literally, crushed your shoulder, possibly tearing your arm off with just the sheer force of the blow. You roll to the side, to avoid the thrust of this mighty warrior, and you actually slam yourself into the tree. So it's actually your own movements saving your life, but causing you damage. So you can use your blocks, your parries, that you can actually land a hit that doesn't cause any significant damage, but you're knocked back from the impact. The wind is forcibly expelled from you. You've got all these different things that are very descriptive, that are usable, that are not you're going to die from this, you know?
Yeah, so that's the challenge in making that interesting and fun, which leads me to like, okay, so if you do that and you do it well consistently, then that gives you the ability when someone actually gets dropped to 0 to really have fun as the DM.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's when you can use the descriptions like, you know, the dark knight, you know, advances on you, brushing aside your sword swipes
With casual ease.
with his shield, and, you know, creating an opening where he rams his sword to the hilt, you know, into your stomach, you know, impaling you. You know, you look down, watching the blood well from the wound as you slide off of his sword, and falling backwards into darkness. You know, give me a death save on your next turn.
You lose consciousness as he begins to, make his way towards your friend.
Yeah, because that's, in essence, that's really when those kind of wounds happen, is when you're at 0. And you're now considering, you are now possibly on death's door.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you're there. You're on death's door, and it's only a few dice rolls that, are going to make it or break it for you.
So I guess I want to know, like, what do you guys do in your games? How are you doing it? I've seen a lot of people that were really angry about the way the healing hit die works in 5th edition, and the fact that you get all your hit points back after a long rest. Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of outcry because they want to describe every attack as
fatal. Well, not fatal, but injuries.
Yeah, yes, pretty much.
I mean, the way to do that, and I guess we can kind of expand this video, or do we want to do that in a separate video?
I don't know. What is your what?
Well, basically, what I would say is like you could take away the expending hit die during a short rest. You use the more fatal, like it takes 7 days of rest to actually restore your hit points. Like isn't there
all those options are actually in the DMG?
Yeah, so like there's that options of stretching
scale
things
up or down.
Yeah, and that gets you more intensive stuff, and yeah, you can take those injuries to your hit points, and you're actually taking those shots. But in order to play those style of games, you need to have a lot of like less damaging encounters, because you're going to need to take significantly larger breaks, and that's gonna extend the storyline out, at least the timeline out, in order to be able to do stuff. So I think as a DM, it's harder to get those condensed storylines done if like, oh well, I need a month's rest to actually heal all of my injuries.
I look at 5th edition. It's laid out much more like 80s action movies. Mm-hmm. The way the damage is handled, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Like the hero gets beat to hell. He's covered head to toe in soot. There's some bruises, and there's some minor lacerations all over the place. Maybe he had to pull one bullet out, somewheres. But he's bandaged up and good to go. That's right. Kind of like and how I look at 5th edition.
And it really fits the heroic theme that D&D 5th edition is really trying to present. It's trying to take these characters and say, let's forget the whole evil aspect. You guys are good guys. You're trying to stem the tides of darkness, and you are, that which rises above the common folk. To be an adventurer means you are of a different caliber of person. And you got to be able to go do all these grand things. So in order for that to happen, yeah, you need to come out of combat, beaten, battered, bruised, and slightly lacerated. But you don't have your eye falling out of its socket, 2 or 3 daggers stuck through you, impaled with a sword, and like, all right, I got 60 hit points left. Let's go. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Like, yeah, like, I feel like maybe if you want to do something with lingering wounds or damage, like, that would be, like, an instance, like, if you got dropped in combat. Mm. And maybe it could even be, like, how many death saves did you pass or fail before you stabilize could, like, also be, like, a factor. It would be more complex and harder to keep track of, but if you feel like you need that kind of, like, realism in your game, then, you have the option. It's there. You can look at the options in the DMG. You can make up stuff, or if your fun is to describe every every hit point of damage is actually being like a real life wound. That's your prerogative as well. It's your gameplay your way. Let us know in the comments below. How are you guys doing? How do you feel about damage? How do you describe your combat scenes and injuries? While you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
You can also support us over on Patreon.
So until next time,
stay nerdy. Before we get too deep into that, though, why don't you go deeper into the description? Look for the link for Nerdarchy, the newsletter. Sign up. It's a great way to get gaming tips delivered straight to your inbox, as well as learn how to game with us.
And here's what I mean by that, right? So I think most of us understand that hit points are an abstraction of basically your overall general health in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not a direct correlation.
Compress, and unfortunately that's going to shove a lot of air out of your lungs. So in my opinion, at least hit points as it's presented in D&D, at least the last several editions, it's
always actually been presented this way.
Well, I mean, back in second edition, we did all kinds of crazy stuff, and people survived with, arrows in the eye, swords literally through them, and it's like, oh,
well, what we did and what was actually meant by the designers are completely different.
True. But it's supposed to represent your combat endurance. If you've ever done any kind of, martial combat, even if it's, fake combat or sparring, you know what it's like to be in the thick of it and actually get wounded. I know you've got a lot of years of martial arts. My hand-to-hand combat, knowledge is very minimal, but I spent a lot of years working, with weapon combat, and on top of that, LARP fighting, which, LARP fighting, there's not a whole lot of real risk of injury short of someone going crazy.
Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
I'm Nerdarchy's Ted.
And today, I had an idea for a video. I don't know if this is going to be a Game Master's tip or not. We'll see how it progresses. but essentially, I was thinking about, combat descriptions, what hit points actually mean mechanically in the game, and, and is that fun? All kind of mingled together.
Right.
So, like, you take 10 points of damage, you just did not get run through by a sword, you didn't take an arrow to the eye, you have not been impaled, chances are you have not even received a cut, or maybe a scrape.
Yeah, if you've got something that does, a significant amount of damage, you might have, a scrape, a bruise, you might have gotten winded. If you're wearing armor and someone, socks you in the gut, whether it's bladed or not, it's gonna